The year is 2600, and within this time, planet Earth has been completely destroyed, and the remaining human beings find themselves plunged into a civil war. As for the sake of humanity, this is the war, fought by the United Terran Forces and the Neo-Galactic Militia. With their efforts combined, their battleships dot the skies and cause countless casualties in every single engagement. Beyond that, that's as much as I know. See, once upon a time when I was a wee bambino, my older brother, who was in middle school at the time, would host parties at our house. And one of the guys who'd show up was a big old football goon. And this guy would bring with him Star Wars freaking Battlefront. And the 8 or so of us would laugh like idiots as we'd blast Yoda with a howitzer over and over, trying our best to launch him into space. But when the fun was said and done, and the evening was over and everyone would pack up and leave, they'd take that game with them. And it left this keen want for more. In particular, that game mode where you fight in ships. That just blew my mind back then. Especially the scale of space, and the near limitless ways it seemed to achieve victory. But it was just crazy. You started off in the hangar and you boarded a ship that decided what your role was going to be in the aerial combat. And then if it went to boarding the enemy vessel, then your class mattered. It was just super revolutionary feeling to me. And I wanted to play it till I got sick of it. But sadly that was not the case. Years passed and I eventually got Steam. And one of the things I started doing on Steam was getting Half-Life mods because I was broke. And of course, one of these Half-Life mods I stumbled across was Eternal Silence. It's honestly a super nifty little mod. And even though there's only a few game modes, they do have quite a lot of content packed within each of them. So explaining it briefly, you're supposed to blow up the enemy vessels before you could board the big battleship. And in order to do that, you have to use the bomber class to go on the offensive to absolutely smack in the most damage, while being defended and supported by the other classes of ships. Once the frigates are destroyed, you're allowed to board the flagship. And this is the most craziest thing about Eternal Silence, is they could have just done the same ship over and over, but they changed the ship. They changed it to like a star base, they'll change it to a meteorite base, they'll change it to a different kind of flagship altogether, and the little frigates that are guarding it, they'll change them up too with their armaments. This combined with the environment in the meteorite fields or the scrap fields or whatever kind of galactic environments you find yourself in really gives a variety to all of the maps. And I have to say the designs on all the ships, I like the militia's design more, but I'll go into that later, are just superb. But the most genius thing about the maps of Eternal Silence is they make them feel megalithic because they put a skybox in a skybox, where the players, when they're fighting in ships, they actually turn miniature. And they're flying around the skybox, so you can see it from inside the hangar, which is real 1-to-1 scale. But then the actual fighting arena skybox is within another skybox to make the maps even seem larger, and it's just a genius use of the Source engine. In total, Eternal Silence has 19 maps, including the 2 tutorial ones. As for the remaining maps, they're divided amongst the 4 game modes: Capture Point, Demolition, Capture the Flag, and Eternal Silence. In total, only 3 maps in Eternal Silence do not involve ship combat. All 3 of those being, of course, Capture Point. But enough about the maps, I want to talk about the visuals. One of my all-time favorite things about Eternal Silence is I feel like both factions were designed entirely by different people. The United Forces have this new sci-fi look to them where everything's smooth and blue and teched out. Their ships are alien to present-day technology. Their uniforms are covered in pads and metals that have computers and all sorts of programming embedded in them. Their faces are covered by masks that have lights all over them. The corridors of their ships are illuminated and bright. Their computers and tech appear futuristic, and the armaments of the soldiers appear to have no expense spared. As for their nemesis, the Neo-Galactic Militia, they are the complete opposite. Their uniforms are almost relatable to ours, save for a few more plates than you'd see on any soldier today. While the United Forces soldiers wear jumpsuits, the militia troops wear a camouflage tunic and slacks. Of the militia units, the only one that has any form of technology on him is the heavy soldier, and even then his shin guard is strapped together with duct tape. As for the computer and props of the militia, they're run down and janky looking. And one thing that always brings a smile to my face is on the side of one of the computers is a sticky note, something very relatable to us today. As for the interiors of the militia ships, are dark and poorly lit catacombs. And speaking of their ships, they appear to be outdated. That is, in comparison to the United Forces' alien-looking vessels. And in the end, I'm just drawn more to the militia, because 1, they're more relatable, but 2, I've always liked an underdog, and clearly these guys are outclassed technology-wise. And also clunky, rusty sci-fi is my favorite. Things that remind me of Firefly or Red Dwarf are just perfect. All of that really just to say is I like the visual direction of the models. The Eternal Silence team did a great job. Well, the name Eternal Silence is no more fitting than it is now. Even when checking the community hub, people are asking back in 2015 if anyone's playing it anymore. The war's pretty much over, and sadly I can't say who won. I guess for a start we can mess around with the tutorials, see what we can and can't do.
Welcome to the Eternal Silence tutorial, Part 1, Basic Flight. I am Ada, your personal artificial defense assistant, and I will try to teach you the basics of the game. In this tutorial, we will cover basic flight controls and targeting. When ready, please enter the tutorial fighter ahead and fly out of the hangar using your forward thrusters.
Oh man, that's pretty neat. Seems like they got a pretty good tutorial system in place.
Using these thrusters will enable you to fly in any direction while still maintaining view of your target.
Long description short, they tell you that you really have a dynamic moveset available to you, brought to you through the use of your 8 thrusters. But from here, this is where the tutorial ends for me, because there's a little bit of an oversight. Some of the key movements are shared with chat and team chat, and it seems that team chat has overruled the movement. And I do have to agree, it is more important to call somebody out for being an asshat and a loser than it is to dodge an oncoming missile. But regardless, there's a lot of fancy moves that you can pull off. But all my memory serves is that everybody just used WASD. It was on a very rare occasion that you actually encountered somebody who knew what they were doing. Thus, at the end of the round, the kill count was very skewed in their favor.
Welcome to part 2 of the tutorial, Game Rules. Here you will learn about ship types and the different phases of the hardcore game mode.
The second tutorial I find was even better. This one focused heavily on the gameplay mechanics and the kinds of ships you'd be using. Sadly, because of the situation the game is currently in, this tutorial serves more as a museum piece. Regardless, it's really neat because it gives heavy details about all the classes of ships. For example, the Interceptor.
The Interceptor is as fast as the fighter, but less maneuverable.
Never mind, you can't really hear it over the soundtrack. Here's the Heavy Fighter.
The Heavy Fighter sacrifices speed and mobility for more firepower. It carries a heavy matter cannon as well as 2 short to medium ranged flak cannons. It is best suited for a defensive role and excels in taking down slow ships such as dropships and bombers. It has deadly efficiency when attacking head-on.
It's pretty neat stuff. I honestly wish more games did that. Taking some time out of their schedule to tell you the best way to use their weapons. It's that kind of extra mile that makes me appreciate Eternal Silence. But past that, they go over the rules of the actual game mode, where you're supposed to blammo the enemy corvettes, which puts the battleship into defense mode, which then you're able to board and take the capture points, and wham bam, the battle's over. And with the battle ending, so does the history of this space. Many years ago, in 1909, a statue was constructed in the city of Chicago. Its name, Eternal Silence. He was put up in the middle of a graveyard, surrounded by death and inactivity. People today say the statue appears grim and mysterious, haunting and eerie. One proposed rumor is that if you look it in the eyes at a certain time, you will be granted a vision of the moment of your death. I wonder if there's ever a connection intended to be made between the statue and the game. Both share similarities of their environment, especially now more than ever. As for the eerie and mysterious appearance of the statue, it's reflected in the game by having no human souls in sight. To even further it, both can be visited at any time, stagnant pillars in their communities. And with that, I don't have much more to say. The game's done. There's no bots, there's no servers. I can go into detail about smaller things, but I feel like that'd just be wasting time. So without further ado, thank you, Eternal Silence, and thank you for coming by to watch this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have memories of this game, and if not, are curious about it, and who knows, maybe something can happen to old mods like these. But regardless, I hope you have an awesome day, and thank you again for watching.